Hi, my name is Craig Brown. I serve our annual conference as the Executive Director of Congregational Development. And I come to you in this video on behalf of the extended cabinet of our annual conference. You may not have heard of the extended cabinet. It's a group that's made up of all 5 district superintendents, including as well the executive staff of the annual conference, and of course with the bishop presiding over our cabinet meetings. We come before you at the time of your district conferences and even in your preparation for those conferences to talk with you about an important proposal that you will be receiving at your district conference. Now, district conferences may be new to you. I know that in some of our districts we've historically had district conferences, and in some of our other districts we have not yet had a district conference. Think of a district conference as a smaller annual conference. The people who vote at a district conference, the clergy and lay members, are the exact same people who will be voting at the annual conference session in June, except they're made up of the individuals from that district alone. There are certain times at a district conference we need to approve certain items, and this year we have one that is very important to the life of our annual conference and to your district, and it is called our proposal for the district union. Now, in order to talk about district unions, I need to explain a little bit about our history, about how we have done work at the district level. Now, back in the day, this annual conference used to have 12 different districts. And at that time, there was an extension society organized in most of those districts. Those extension societies were present to expand the work of the local church, to engage with new people, and at times even to engage in church planting efforts. But over the years, as you know, our districts have shifted in the life of this annual conference. We went from 12 districts at a point in time down to just 7 districts, as you can see represented on this map in front of you. After a good number of years with 7 districts, a decision was made to switch to 4 districts, and then just recently back to 5 districts that you can now see represented on this map as well. Now, in these 5 districts, there are different extension societies. Some of those extension societies that date back to the days of 12 districts are fully contained within a district today. Other extension societies overlap districts so that 2 or 3 districts might even have churches in the same extension society. In addition to all of that, of our 12 extension societies, 2 of them are now defunct and closed. 3 others are looking at ending their operation and handing over their assets to a new entity. So if 5 of our 12 extension societies cease to operate, that means 30% of our churches would no longer be a part of an extension society. They would not be able to receive any of the benefit of being in a society, any of the options to receive funding or grants. And so it became clear to the extended cabinet that we needed to think about our extension societies in a new way. Now, another piece of this story is that in 1992, the General Conference removed from the Book of Discipline any mention of extension societies, and in turn replaced it with the district union. So for all these years, since 1992, we've been existing and functioning with different extension societies around our district, our annual conference, which are actually out of compliance with the Book of Discipline. So this effort about district unions from the extended cabinet is about bringing our entire annual conference in line with the Book of Discipline. It's also about making sure that every single one of our churches, not 70%, not 30%, but every church is a part of an opportunity to share in the assets, the grant making, and the work that district unions can have within each district. Now, a district union is essentially the board of trustees for a district. They can hold property, they can hold financial assets. They're essentially the financial and physical repository of all the things that a particular district might own. And so let me talk with you about what district unions can do and how that applies to our district conferences. So first, let's talk about where money comes from that might come into the district union's financial accounts. There are several different sources where that money might come from. The first example would be from the proceeds of local church real estate that might be sold. Let's say there's a church in your district where the decision has been made to close that church and sell the property. When that property is sold, an amount of money from the proceeds of that would come to the district union. I'll talk more about how those proceeds are allocated in a few minutes, but for right now, just remember that one of the primary ways a district union receives its funding is through the sale of local church property. Now, there are some other ways in which a district union might receive funds in its accounts as well. Those could be gifts from churches or individuals, and it might even be the income that we receive on investments in those accounts. So these three, the receipt of money from the proceeds of sold local church property, gifts from churches or individuals, or income from investments, are the ways in which the district union receives its funds. Well, if the district union is holding financial assets and even real estate for the work and ministry of the district, what is it that they can use those funds for? Well, according to the bylaws that we've drafted, the district union is allowed to use its financial and real estate assets for certain things. And here's a short list of some of the possibilities that the district union could use those funds for. One, they could offer grants to local churches or to circuits or other groups of churches to advance the work of ministry in their context. They could offer conditional donations. A conditional donation is like a grant, except that if that particular local church that receives a donation ever ceases to be a United Methodist Church, they would have to pay the donation back to the district. So in addition to these grants and conditional donations, the district unions can offer scholarships. They can fund certain district ministries and initiatives that might advance the work of Jesus Christ within every one of our districts. The district unions are governed by a board of 12 people, and those 12 people are elected at the district conference. And so let me talk about the process of district unions. If we know that extension societies need to come to an end because they're out of compliance with the Book of Discipline, and that many of our churches aren't in an extension society, how do we create a district union? Well, we do that at a district conference. The Book of Discipline is clear that only a district conference can create a district union, and those who are the voting members of that district conference are the only ones allowed to make that decision. And so, along with this video, you'll find a copy of the bylaws of the proposed district union for you to review and to consider as you prepare to come to your district conference to vote. At your district conference, you'll be invited to vote on establishing a district union with these bylaws and the articles of incorporation. This is a legal proceeding, and so your district superintendent will be handling the district conference in a very organized way so that we can ensure that the legal processes we need to follow to create these district unions are appropriate and accurate. Additionally, at the district conference, you'll be voting on your district nominating report, in which you'll seat the 12 members of the district union board. Those board members will be responsible for organizing the work of the district union as it's established, developing the processes that they would like to use in order to allocate funds, to give grants, to offer scholarships, whatever it might be within your district. And so I hope you can see the district conference has a very, very important place in the life of our annual conference in organizing these district unions, so that local churches have their buildings, their physical assets, and other assets to do ministry. The districts will have their own assets to engage and do ministry to advance the work of their local churches. And the annual conference also has its assets that it uses to advance the work of the local church and our entire connectional system. So as you prepare for your district conference, whether it be on May 18th or June the 1st, please be sure to read these bylaws in detail and come prepared to vote on whether your district will be ready to establish a district union so that the work of Jesus Christ can continue. In addition to district unions being considered at your district conferences, there will be some other information we need to give you at the district conference and your pre-annual conference session orientation about a proposed rules change to the standing rules of this annual conference that also comes from the extended cabinet. And the reason we're explaining it here is because this rules change goes hand in hand with the proposal for the district unions. You might remember a few moments ago I explained that one of the ways the district union receives a significant part of its funding is through the proceeds of local church property that's been sold. Right now, when a piece of local church property is sold, its assets are allocated to extension societies 100%. That process, unfortunately, is completely in violation of the Book of Discipline, which requires that sold property in the annual conference be immediately vested in its title to the annual conference Board of Trustees. So if that's the case, it's important for the annual conference to have a policy and procedure about what happens when we sell a piece of local church property. The rules change that is being brought to this year's annual conference session that you will be voting on at annual conference specifically applies to this topic. And so for a moment, let me tell you the policy and process that we would like to establish when we sell a piece of local church property. So let's say a church in a particular location is being sold. A decision has been made through the appointive cabinet, through any other types of processes to sell a location. When we sell that piece of property, of course, it's going to generate proceeds, the money that we receive for the sale of that piece of property. That money is to be allocated according to this proposed rules change in the following manner. The first step is that if that local church has any arrearage on its health insurance or pension liability, that out of the proceeds of the sale of that property, those monies are paid to our annual conference Board of Pensions. Secondly, if that church that's been closed has not paid any portion of its conference tithe in the previous 5 years, then that amount is received by the annual conference for that entire 5-year period, that unpaid amount. That amount of money is used only to pay general and jurisdictional church apportionments. That money is not going to be held here at the annual conference. It's going to be given to our general and jurisdictional apportionments to continue moving the connectional work of the church forward. So after the pension liability has been paid, after any arrearage in the conference tithe has been paid, what happens to the rest? Well, there's an allocation about what happens to the rest. Since we're closing a church, the rationale is that we need to use a significant amount of that money to start a new church somewhere. That we simply don't want to be in the business of closing churches and having fewer and fewer locations for fewer and fewer people. That if we're going to close a church, we also want to make it a priority that we're going to open a church someplace else. This is part of the resurrection narrative that we live in, that there is death and there's resurrection. There's new life. And so because of that, the rules change stipulates that 10% of the proceeds of the sale of a piece of property immediately goes to our annual conference committee on new and vital congregations. And they can use that money to immediately invest in starting new congregations in new places for new people. 40% of the proceeds is then set aside into one of two endowment funds. Now, these endowments are very specific. One endowment is for church development and planting work in the urban context, and the other endowment fund is for all other contexts. The Book of Discipline requires that assets that the annual conference has acquired from an urban setting must be used in an urban setting. And that's why there's two endowment funds. These endowments will hold the principal of the money that's deposited into them, but will only spend the earnings that those endowments create each year. Those earnings are to be used for the development of new churches. So you can see, out of the 100% of the proceeds that are there, 50% of those proceeds are designated specifically to the work of starting new churches and new communities of faith. Now, what about the remaining 50%? Well, 30% will go directly to our district unions. It will be a way for the district unions to fund and to finance their ministry. 10% will be allocated to the core team of the annual conference. The core team is the ministry arm of the life of the church. All of our conference committees, all of our conference programs and ministries relate to the core team. So the core team will be able to use those funds to invest in ministries that the annual conference is supporting here in the life of this annual conference. And finally, the remaining 10% is designated for use by our bishop and appointive cabinet so that they have the capacity to fund ministry in places that may not be able to support it. Consider, for example, we might have a church in a location where we really want to revitalize a congregation and to help it grow again, but that congregation has shrunk to a point that it can't afford to sustain its own operations. This final 10%, the appointive cabinet could use to infuse that congregation with life as part of a revitalization effort. So I hope you can see that the allocation of these funds from the sale of a local church property are designed to advance the work of the church in the world. This is not a proposal about lining the coffers of the annual conference or the district. This is a proposal about investing our assets in growing the church so that we can build new and vital congregations everywhere in our annual conference. Again, let me be clear. The bylaws and articles of incorporation for our district union will be voted on and approved at our district conferences. The rules change regarding the proceeds from the sale of local church real estate will be considered at our annual conference session during one of our plenary gatherings and be considered on the floor of the annual conference. I look forward to seeing you at your district conferences. My colleagues on the executive staff will be deployed to all of the district conferences. We'll look forward to meeting you there, and as well as the annual conference session in Modesto this coming June. Should you have any questions about the district unions or the real estate proposals, feel free to contact my office, the Office of Congregational Development, and our contact information can be found on the conference website. We look forward to seeing you on May 18th, June 1, and at annual conference later in June in Modesto. God bless you.